Hi, Tony and Suzanne. Thanks for the conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Doing it. We're doing it. So Tony, let me start with you. I am as bored as everyone by standard generational differences, but something is real about workforce, particularly post-pandemic, particularly generation. So we want to talk about some of the data you guys have at Upwork, and Suzanne, talk a bit about your experience and see how that mirrors it. So Tony, start us with the basics. What have you guys seen recently at Upwork, and how it relates to Gen Z in the workforce?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Chris. Really a pleasure to be having this conversation with you because I think a lot of organizations, particularly HR leaders, are missing the boat on how much this generation is changing the way that they plan to and the way that they actually are working in this workforce. So specifically to the data, Gen Z is absolutely at the forefront of this massive shift of choosing freelancing or a different type of independent entrepreneurial approach to work compared to this traditional 9 to 5 employment that frankly a lot of us have just grown and come up with. According to our data, 53% of Gen Z freelancers are performing freelance work for at least 40 hours per week. So they're really choosing this as a career. And I think that trend represents both opportunities and challenges for HR, particularly because they need to figure out how to incorporate freelancing, contracting into their overall talent strategy in order to engage a lot of this up and coming talent. Um, but also it gives them an opportunity to not only shift the way that they build out their employment strategies, but come up with new ways to engage talent and meet them where they're already going, which is in this more SOW, project based, skills based approach to org design.
I want to hop on a few points there, Tony. Before I do, Suzanne, let's bring you in. I want to hear a little bit about your personal experience. What are you doing now? How it maps to this idea of a different relationship to work. So tell us a bit about yourself, Suzanne. What are you working on? Who are you, and how does it map to those trends? And we'll dig into them then.
Yeah, for sure. So I started freelancing straight out of college about 6 years ago. After a year of freelancing, I started my own graphic design agency to just kind of expand that a bit more. And from personal experience, it seems like a lot more of Gen Z is starting out freelance rather than going into a corporate job. But I do think that when you see that happening across an entire generation, it may be due to a corporate system that's no longer serving us. Like for me, it's just a fact that the jobs out there that I could apply to do not offer the same security or the same job benefits that my parents and grandparents had. So for myself, freelancing was a way that I could make sure that I felt like I was being compensated fairly for my work, and that I could kind of choose my own benefits in a way. And I think a lot of Gen Z feels similarly.
Yeah, I want to a lot there that I want to start with. But Tony, let me go to you first. HR executive experience. I've spent 15 years covering labor and workforce trends. I count as, I think, semi-elder millennial. You can go back and find complaints about, oh, these baby boomer kids are real crazy. And then Gen X came, and these Gen X's, they're dropping out. They won't sell out. And then it was millennials, and we said, these gosh darn millennials have all their feelings. Part of me says, like, aren't we just saying every younger generation ever has a different relationship to work, and isn't that a big whoop? Or are you pushing that something is different here? Help me, how much is just every younger generation's new, or is something different happening?
Every generation is new. We just don't understand it in the previous generations. We're used to a paradigm that we've come up in, and when we see this new paradigm really being driven by that generation, and that's kind of what shocks us. So when I think of Gen Z, yes, it's all like just like every generation. There's like a culture shock to the work culture, work system. The thing that's the biggest shock is AI, and It's almost surprising we've been talking this long and not talked about AI yet, because you can't help it. This hype cycle is real, but this generation is growing up in it and embracing it. This new technology at a pace that's not like they can't wait till they go through university training on AI, come out and find AI jobs. They're taking on that upskilling, reskilling all themselves. And our data shows that not only are they picking it up themselves, Gen Z professionals, 51% are already adopting generative AI, but Gen Z freelancers are doing it at a faster rate, 61%, compared to their full-time counterparts, 41%. And that's a pretty big gap. But it shows us that they're using it more because they recognize the value to potential employers that want to bring them on to get that work done, AI specific work, or because they recognize the value for themselves to be more efficient with their time and bring a lot more value where they spend their time.
All right, let's come back to AI here in a sec. But Suzanne, so I grew up in the 1900s, and so in the 2010s, when the biggest bulk of millennials were coming to the workforce.
Oops. Did we lose him?
I feel like we lost Chris for just a second.
There we go.
There he
bizarre. Is. I could hear you. The same thing happened to me. The 2010s, we had a similar moment with millennials, that every magazine had this cover of these kids are working so different. The workplace can't adapt for them. Now, I do get one of Upwork's data pushes that interests me is the freelancer independent route. That is one credible change that I think, even as a journalist, I view as structural and is new. I do think the AI moment has some depth to it. And I think we can account for some change from the pandemic, that there was a cultural moment. Those, for me, are all true and defensible. And I would bet 50 years from now, we'll look back and say those were real things. They weren't just kind of a hype cycle. But I'm kind of curious from your perspective, if you deign to engage with any of the decrepit millennials, just a little bit older than you, or any other generation, do you, from your own vantage point, feel like something is actually different about the relationship to work, or are we just describing, hey, anytime a new generation comes into the workforce, things are a little bit different? Do you think something is different?
I think a lot of it is that generational view that everyone has within their generation, where they see the new generation coming up and they're like, oh, I don't understand what these kids are doing, because it wasn't like the work that I did. So I'm in an interesting demographic because I'm right on the cusp of Gen Z and millennial. So I have peers in both groups. Mm-hmm. I would say one of the biggest differences that I see is actually our relationship to technology. So probably starting with my year and anyone who's younger than me, we did not grow up in a world without computers in our homes or without internet. So just by default, we are used to having access to that. We're more comfortable experimenting with it. So I think just as a generation, we're a little bit quicker to adopt that in our workflows and kind of play around with it and see what we can get it to do to work better for us.
All right, so let's do the AI thing, Tony. I think the adoption is interesting. We at Technically have done oodles of reporting that experimentation is wide, but real productivity gains are not substantial yet, and that also is common. That's not unusual. Lots of technologies, early adopters talk about it more than they change the world early on, and then later on we see the widespread adoption of it. But one of the things from 15 years of reporting around entrepreneurship and independent solo workers is, in the past, an uncomfortable truth has been, on average, self-employed people earn less than their traditionally employed people. So on the whole, more common the story is the Uber driver who has 4 gigs and is trying to piece it together and is underperforming financially. But I think Upwork's data has always been interesting to me, because we do see this class of folks who are outperforming their peers. So that hasn't traditionally been the story. And so we at Technically have always wrestled with that coverage, that the big picture of self-employment has been people falling through the cracks, and some stars really outperform. Do we think something is different? Do we think this post-pandemic relationship to work, the technology tools that let people, build their operations differently? Like, maybe Tony, I can start with you. Are you optimistic that self-employment can be on average better for the worker than it has been in the past?
100%. I think Suzanne touched on this, and it's exactly what's true. Technology is what has enabled this frictionless work experience where you can engage with a company as a contractor, do a short project, get paid, develop a new skill, like all on your own, and then immediately deploy that skill and get paid for it. That hasn't existed before, and with that, as companies are starving, especially in the US, with a near 50-year low unemployment rate for years, despite this skyrocketing federal interest rate, all these dynamics that typically would lead to higher unemployment. The jobs numbers that just came out yesterday surprised everybody. Like, we're in this really tight market, and that's going to continue, especially as overall global workforce participation rate continues to be on the same decline it's been on for the last 20 years. All these things combined with technology making it really easy to match companies with talent that want to get work done together, and it's driving companies to then focus more on this skills-based approach. What do I really need? Do I need that 4-year degree to fill a generalized job description and everything's kind of vague and I just throw a body in a seat? Or what do I really need to get done? Can that person do it? I want to hire them and get that done, keep my projects on time, etc. And I think importantly, if I want the talent that really has the new in-demand skills, more likely than not, I won't be able to find them in those traditional work paths. I'm going to have to leverage marketplaces or identify that talent directly in order to engage with them.
So I fumbled with technology at the beginning of this interview, so I'm already at time. I might have to send you a couple follow-up questions. But Suzanne, why don't you send us out? You let's say you're talking with a group of your peers. You've gathered around the fire, the youth of the world, and they look to you, Suzanne, for wisdom of their economic future. How bullish are you on going independent and freelance? How do you contrast it with the traditional gains of traditional employment? What do you say to the youth of the world, Suzanne, who look to you as the bright light in the stormy sea?
Yeah, so I would say with the data that we're referencing in this conversation, I think only 3% of Gen Z identified themselves as company founders. And if you want to do this full time and you want this to be a viable career path, I hate to break it to you, but you are running a business and you have to treat it as such. And I think that's the only way that you can really find success in freelancing, is giving it the time and dedication like it's a business, because it is.
Suzanne, you delivered. Suzanne, Tony, thank you for burdening, being patient with our technical difficulties. Thanks for this interview. I will likely get you some follow-up questions via the team, but thanks so much for the insight.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you as well. Great seeing you both.
Great to see you. Apologize for the fumbles. Talk to you soon.
Thanks.
And thanks for the rest of the team. I'll catch up over email. So yeah, thank you.